right, we're live, man. How you doing this week?
Wow, I'm doing amazing. Yeah, it's been a very exciting past couple of weeks. I
Really?
had my daughter to graduate from Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts. About,
Congratulations to her.
yeah, about I guess about 2 weeks ago or so.
Mhm.
Then my youngest son, he graduated from high school, and then this past week, my nephew, he graduated, and we celebrated him. So
Okay,
a little
busy
bit of
with the
traveling back and
graduations.
forth. So that's part of the reason why I was out of pocket last week. But I understand that you carried on and made things happen.
hmm Yeah, just a quick little feel. We definitely missed your presence last week. I was just getting some feedback on the last show, and people definitely missed your energy and your ability to that's something that it showed me what you do so well is steering the conversation and keeping things on point. So I was definitely lacking in that last episode, but I mean I had fun talking to Chris. Definitely want to get you guys on at the same time so we can kind of all talk together. Yeah, Chris got a lot of cool things going on, but yeah, man, we're here. We're back for episode 7. We've been keeping this going alive. So actually, this is actually an extra one for people because typically we would skip this, but since you weren't here last week, I was like, yeah, we gotta get it in as well. So, thankful that you're able to join us today and ready to get this discussion or well, wherever whatever we're talking about, I mean, I know I was saying I was gonna get back to you on that book, but I got to maybe like chapter 3 or 4, and it didn't remind me of the parts that I wanted to bring up in conversation. So we can save that for another time. But
Sure, it's all good. And
mm,
Chancellor Williams is one of our great scholars, and don't worry, we'll get back to that.
for sure.
It's been interesting how I've been led to flow with this because I was thinking to myself this morning, I said, wow, we had a particular topic, and I guess consistency will always come up somewhere along the line, probably.
Mm,
But in many ways, in following this hip hop theme that you kind of introduced a few episodes ago, and as I said to our audience, that you you will be known as an authority in the hip hop arena. Well, we know that there's something called freestyling,
mm.
and there's some people who freestyle very well. As a matter of fact, before I make the point that I was going to make, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Who would you say right now in the game,
Mhm.
top three freestylers, top three guys who, I'm saying guys, it may be a girl, I don't
Mhm.
know. But when you think about people who can freestyle, who would you say are the top three people that if you put a mic in their hand, you're about to be in for a show. No
Okay.
disappointment. Who are your top three?
See, the thing is, it would trick me up if my top three weren't like my top three rappers weren't already like prolific freestylers. So Absol, he did just kind of do a recent oh well, it's maybe like a year old now, but when he got onto the mic, what I mean, he did his thing. I think it was on the LA Leakers, I believe. That's a freestyle platform on the West Coast. So Absol always gets busy. Somebody who's a guy named King Los. I'm not. I haven't seen him. He used to he'd be like my go-to for all freestyles. Back in the day. Well, not really back in the day. Maybe like Well, actually, yeah, probably back in the day. Now it's probably been about 10 years because I guess certain people don't
I told you
really.
you becoming an OG, man.
Yeah,
See?
yeah, yeah. So,
When you can remember back 10 years, that
yeah, once it's 10 years, so. But he used to always be like in terms of like being a wordsmith and just he would be one of those people who would be like, yeah, just give me a word and then I'm a, you know, just come up with a whole but with like 5 bars for that one word and just be able to make it all go together. So when it comes to freestyling, he's definitely one of them as well. Number three, I want to try and get somebody recent because my thing is, a lot of the freestyles that we see today aren't necessarily freestyles. Like they'll brand it as a freestyle, but it'll just kind of be like a written verse or something. So, number
and
three.
I'm glad you said that. I
Mhm.
can't I a lot of people don't understand that, and I wanted that to come out because when we think about the classical freestylers from the days of yesterday, when to go back to a term that you used the last time we were together, when you had more of the purist involved.
Mhm.
And and not to knock any of the newbies, as you will, because the truth is usually when you have those people who start something, most of the time those people are often the purists.
Mhm.
That's just how it works. I don't care what it is or what the genre is. The people who usually get something off the ground, they're usually seen as the people who are the purists. This is the way we do it. This is the way it's supposed to be done. And then you have the innovators who come along later on who say, "Okay, but we can tweak it," and then they become accused of something else. So
Mhm.
I don't want to make it sound like when I use the term purist that I'm somehow poo-pooing on the people who are now picking up the baton and running, because I'm one of those people. I'm guilty, and then I'm gonna let you get back to what you're saying. I'm guilty when you think about the female rappers who you taught me that really when you think about people who are selling records, it's probably the women who are selling more records right now.
Mhm.
I'm saying maybe I should be saying streams. We know we're here in the Atlanta area, and we know Megan was in town,
Yep.
and one of my friends went to the concert, and she said, and actually got to meet Megan, and she said it was outstanding. She just she's an amazing performer and all of that. So yeah, I think that some of the some of the young cats who are paying attention to hip hop and they hear the term freestyle. When I say freestyle, I'm talking about somebody, like you said, you give them a word or give them a topic, and they haven't had an opportunity to prepare as such. They have to
Mhm.
take their own prior knowledge and make something happen with that word or that phrase. Yeah.
Right.
But go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So my third, who would my third be? I would be I'll be like I do want to mention J. Cole in there, just for his technical skills. I don't know when the last time I seen him freestyle. Actually, I do think he did a LA Leakers freestyle, so you know what I mean. I definitely want to shout out his skills. But actually, for maybe my third one, I'll go a little bit more unorthodox. So there's an artist, because honestly, real quick for freestyling today, a lot of artists are freestyling, but what they're doing is they're doing a method called punching in to where they'll record one line, listen back to it, and then think of another line, and then kind of so they're just like they'll say one bar, take a second to think about it, then come back and then complete the next bar. So that's what they call punching in. So in that sense, there are a lot of rappers who kind of freestyle to that degree to where they're not writing, and I think that's also been a big thing. People are just want to be like, oh yeah, nothing's written down, which I'm not really a big fan of. But I guess for people who can kind of like get out a whole song, it would be I like a guy named RXK Nephew. He's from New York. Um, he does a lot of punch-in rapping. So I mean, I consider it freestyling because it's less polished necessarily than your probably standard rap song that you'd hear. And it's kind of almost unadulterated thoughts. So it doesn't sound like it sound the way he's rapping. It sounds like the first thing that comes to his mind is like, okay, we just living with that, whatever, however people react. So let's say some wild things, but yeah, because and I also don't want to diminish any like battle rappers or anything. Like I know Daylight is a very good battle rapper, and I learned about him from Absol as well, because he had put like a battle between Absol and Daylight at the end of one of his projects. I think it was on the end of These Days. So they had like a 7 to 10 minute rap battle back and forth. So yeah, I would say so. Yeah, for me, I would say Absol, King Lowe's. King Lowe's probably technically the best, just as being coming up with things witty, like really off of the top. And then yeah, I'll throw probably just J. Cole in there just because I haven't really been too keen on a freestyle. Like I said, all the freestyles that they have are just kind of songs that they're trying to put on a new platform. So I'll
So you
leave
got
it
to send me some of that stuff because I've always
for
been
sure.
fascinated by those people who are actually able to freestyle. I went to school with a guy, very talented, a very talented wordsmith. Back then, he went by the name of Quentin Stith,
Hmm.
and these days he's known as Aj and Tayembe, and he's an author and he he would rap back in the day. Also, he's from Harlem, and he had the ability to freestyle. He definitely had the ability to freestyle.
We could try real quick to let me see if 'cause I want to try and presenting certain things just so people could kind of have a snippet of what we're talking about. So I'm gonna try and share my screen of this last one. Let me just see how that goes. I don't even know how it's gonna sound necessarily, but let's give it. Can you see? You can see it.
Uh huh.
Okay. So I'm gonna try and keep the volume down. Oop. You can hear good.
So I can't hear them though.
You can't. Okay. Let me
I can
see.
hear you, but not them.
That's why I want. That's why we gotta practice. Maybe it's because let's see. I don't know if it has any settings for that. Share screen.
And while you're playing with that, let me go ahead and share where I was going and bringing up the term freestyle. So
Mhm.
this session and the last session to a degree, not as much so. I really didn't know for sure what the topic would be until maybe 35 minutes ago, and so what that also tells everybody is that you and I hadn't already discussed it, and so that was what was similar about the last session as well. We just got on, and
Mhm.
you found out what we was talking about, and we just made it happen. And so it's going to be a little bit like that today as well, with just freestyle. You're going to try it again, see if we can get some volume to it.
Yeah. Let me just see. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out
Yeah,
another time.
we'll try it another time, and then they can always yeah, they can always go and look it up because at least they can see. Yeah, they can see what it is that you was trying to share.
Hmm. Can you hear it?
No,
No.
it's still
Okay.
not letting me hear. Yeah,
All right. Cool. No problem. We'll figure it out another time.
that's fine. So this is where I want to go.
Okay.
And I had mentioned in a previous episode that I wanted to address this, and you'll know where I'm going or how it connects to a topic that we kind of touched on lightly. When we think about the term forgiveness, most of us, we know what that term means and what it means to forgive someone. My question to you is, and I guess I might have to answer it for myself, is what is it that a person could do that will cause you to say, you know what, I just can't, I can't, I can't get over that, or I can't forgive that. Is there such a thing
Such a thing to where it can't be forgiven.
for you personally? What's something that a person could do that you would say, I can't get past this. I don't think I could forgive that person for that.
Hmm. For that, for something I couldn't forgive somebody for, I don't know if I ran across a situation to where I couldn't forgive somebody for. There's things that people have done that I haven't forgiven them for yet.
Still
But
working on it.
but in terms of it being like completely out of the question for it to be forgiven, and I'm not sure. And I do think that it does matter.
So let me ask the question a different way then.
Okay.
What type of thing do you find the hardest to forgive? Let me ask it that way. Because I had a feeling that we've been vibing for a little while, and I'm kind of similar.
Hmm.
It's that would be hard for me to say that thing that I couldn't ever forgive, but I I can answer the question for those things that are difficult to forgive. So, what?
Yeah.
Let's ask it that way. What's something that a person could do? And actually, I don't know if I want to say that it needed to happen to you personally, right?
Hmm.
Because sometimes there are things that really tumble us up that was done to
Right. Exactly.
somebody else that we care about, and don't let that person be somebody that we care about profoundly. Then
Right.
it
Exactly.
becomes a bit more difficult to forgive. So let
And
me ask it that way.
that's where it gets convoluted, because it's certain things that you can do to me. I don't necessarily like, you know what I mean? Things that happen to me personally, I can get over. I can always find people's forgiveness, but like, taking advantage of other people, um, to that, it kind of then lands on, especially depending on the relationship that I have with the person that you've offended. Because I think that kind of comes down to almost like a loyalty thing. So, and it kind of almost comes to where you have to kind of wait for that other person to forgive them first before you can kind of move forward with something. Um,
That's interesting that you say
cause,
that. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's interesting.
because sometimes it's not really your forgiveness that people are looking for. So, if you violate somebody in a way that, they're still hurting over, and, you try and come to me and apologize for, the hurt that it caused me because you did something to somebody else. it's like, am I really free to accept that apology in the place of that other person who you hurt? So in that sense, it's, it's not necessarily unforgive. It's not and the thing that they might have done might be unforgivable to that person. So then it's kind of, it leaves you in a weird position when it comes to how you move forward with a situation like that. Because yeah, if somebody else is still affected by a decision that you made, and you never try to make amends with that person, then it's difficult. Like, now, if you try and make amends with that person, and that person is just, you know holding a grudge, but I've seen you make an attempt, and truly turn over, change your ways, turn over your leaf, because that person may never forgive you for what you did, depending on what it is. But I do think that in a sense that you are sincere, and when you were attempting to apologize, and I've seen you, change your ways for the better, then that might be room for forgiveness on my end. But that's still, the relationship still might change based off of the nature of the offense, and it's a lot of things. So I think I'll leave my answer there for now, and I can elaborate a little later. How do you feel?
So one of my spiritual mentors kind of challenged me and all that was in earshot. He was sharing that there was this person that did him dirty, and as fate would have it, he and this person ended up in the same space. And as somebody that, to use the appropriate term in this case, as someone that preaches forgiveness as he does, he found himself in a position where he had to ask himself, okay, what is it that's appropriate? What's my appropriate response facing this person?
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, I can't remember if he said he handled the situation appropriately in that instance. I think that the way that he handled it is what provoked him to then talk about it to all of us.
Hmm.
I think after the fact, he realized that he probably should have stepped to the person and spoke. Now, to the point that you were making earlier, the question of whether or not the relationship could be repaired. So that's a totally different question and thing to consider, because I would also say that just because we decide to forgive a person, let's say a person tried to borrow your car permanently,
Hmm.
and and when you call the police, you found out that it was this person that attempted it, and
Right.
and now you're like, wow. So you've been in my house, and you're the one. You took the keys from out of my house. You were supposed to be watching my house for me, and instead, anyway, forgiveness to me doesn't mean that you now are allowing this person back in your house.
Right.
It means that you've decided that you have moved away from potentially trying to do harm or wish harm on that person.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know, I've thought about this question and struggled with my own response to this in some situations. And I've had some, you know, like most of us, I've had some people to really do me dirty.
Hmm.
And sometimes I've been accused of doing people dirty. And maybe maybe that was true. I'm grateful that in those situations that I'm aware of, I was able to, apologize and ask for forgiveness. But then also sometimes sometimes we don't have all the information too.
Right.
So right now we might find ourselves in a space of unforgiveness towards a person based upon the information that we have. But if we had all of the information, we might have a different opinion.
Mhm.
And I find myself in that position as well because sometimes, especially with public figures, I never forget when I was a college student and I was in a conversation with one of my who turned out to be one of my mentors. And by the way, you hear that word mentor. I'm talking to the audience now. You hear that word mentor, and you'll hear me use that word a lot. If you don't have a mentor, you need one. You know, everybody that I know that is successful, whatever that word means, they have a mentor.
Yeah.
And many of them had multiple mentors. But anyway, that's just an ad.
Mhm.
So I said to him, I said, hey, I can't understand how this person, and if I said this person's name, this person is very popular in culture and otherwise. The person that I was struggling with, um, I guess you could say forgiving at that time. I didn't,
Mhm.
and sometimes the people that we fall into unforgiveness with are not even necessarily people we've met,
Right.
but people who we've supported or developed an affinity with. And
Mhm.
then we find out something about that person, and now we're dangling that person over the cliff. And so what my mentor said at the time, he said, Frank, I hear what you're saying about this person, about what you heard about this person. He said, but this person that you're talking about was a man of integrity. And that really did something to me when he said that, because here was somebody that was old enough at that time. He was old enough to be my my father.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself that his experience must have taught him something that I don't know.
Mhm.
And just this morning, I was listening to another one of my mentors, and he was saying that people who have more than you, he was talking to his audience, said people who have more than you, they often do because they know more than you do.
Mhm.
So ever since that experience with my mentor, it actually made me dig a little deeper to find out more about that person, even though at that time I felt like I knew more than most people about that person. But it led me to dig more. And after I dug a little more, guess what? I agree with my mentor. Now, that doesn't mean that I agreed with everything that that person did,
Mhm.
but it took me out of that space of, for lack of another term, judgment, because looking at him holistically, I had I was able to still respect him.
Mhm.
And then you probably can guess where we're going. You're a smart man. You know you probably know
Mhm.
ultimately where this is going in hip hop and a lot of things what people
Mhm.
are talking about. I'm guessing that we're talking about this in a way that nobody else has before, which is again what's going to make this unique, make us unique. If we're willing to throw away certain people, for example, I'm gonna put out a name that so many people threw in the trash without knowing all the facts. His name is R. Kelly. A lot of
Mhm.
people threw R. Kelly away, said, you know what, we're gonna burn his his CDs that we have. R. Kelly's nothing. I'm not listening to his music ever again. So I'm going to say this: we have to be very careful because here's the thing: somebody somebody outed R. Kelly to the extreme,
Mhm.
right? But there are a lot of others who are prolific, whose brand we still honor and respect and support. That they just haven't been outed.
Right.
People threw Cosby away,
Hmm.
and then later on we found out that Mr. Cosby, he was under attack for a particular reason. Now, am I saying that the things that it was proven that he did that was wrong is acceptable? Of course not. But what I'm saying is that sometimes we may not have enough information to dangle someone else off the cliff.
Hmm.
And so when I approached my mentor many moons ago, I was dangling this person up over the cliff. And he said, "Hey," he said, I remember the conversation like yesterday. He said, "That man is a man of integrity." Now
Right.
that contradicts everything that information that I had gotten about that man would say. I think that all humans are complicated. And as one of my teachers is fond of saying these days, but by the grace of Yahweh, there go I. Or he, to add on to that, he's very quick to say that we all have skeletons.
Mhm.
We all do.
I agree with that.
And so the one thing, and I mentioned this particular person, but I didn't mention what he did. But the one thing that I can say I've struggled with recently, and I brought this up before, you could probably, if people paid attention, they could see that my whole body language and everything changed when I talked about this person. And I struggle around this person. And I've asked the Father, how do you want me to deal with this? Because you've got in the book that I read, he's got this whole thing about forgiving people and not carrying grudges and even loving our enemies, which
Mhm.
which is a really big ask. There's this guy who I feel is responsible for killing a lot of folks around the world, and he's a greed monger. He's got people that work with him, and he's amongst those people who call the shots around the world. Whenever we see this person in the media, he comes across as this loving grandfather. And yet, the reality is, he's like the great deceiver.
Mhm.
And so, people like that really tumble me up because, on the one hand, you might not, you're younger than me, so you might not remember her, but as somebody that studies and so forth, you might know of this person for that reason. But when all of this was going on, you were probably too young to remember it in the media. But there's a woman named Kimba Smith, and they had they threw the book at her. She got mixed up. Matter of fact, for those people, for those old heads who are on here with me, with us, who remember Kimba Smith. Kimba Smith, she went to Hampton University, and back in the '90s, and she got hooked up with this guy that was in the game, and he made her his mule.
Mhm.
And when they caught up to her, she was looking at a 25-year bid. There's a documentary or movie out about her life, came out this year, Well, last Wednesday, actually, a week ago, I went to hear her, and um, interesting enough, she was one of the people who, um, when I was a school teacher,
Mm.
I remember when her story came out in the newspapers, and I said to my students who were eighth or seventh or eighth graders at the time, "Wow, look at look at this story, and look at how this person was taken advantage of, and look at what can become of her life." She's a university student that got lured off into the fast lane.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah.
one
You found her. You
for
found her.
references for people.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I want people to go watch that documentary. I saw it. It's good. And it's a story that all of our young people, young males and females, but particularly our young girls, because you get somebody that comes across your path and, he offers you a trip somewhere, or he offers you some flashy jewelry. You get enamored now and you're in love with this person. You dump the person that you were going with, who was in your class. The next thing you know, you never really question where all this cash is coming from.
Mm.
Or this person doesn't really seem to work, but they're just paid. That there's no red flags for you, and now you end up into something, and you're over your head. Well, where reason why I bring up Kimba is that no matter how we cut it, compared to this international gangster that I'm talking about that's killed people all over the world,
Mm.
indirectly, of course, they were trying to give her they now they were able. That's why you need to check the story out.
Mm.
She didn't do the 25 thanks to advocates and some good lawyers. But this guy who's in office right now as president, he was one of the people that was responsible for the drug law, the draconian drug laws that was locking up particularly people, young men and women of color, for moving very, very little work. But the people who operate in the shadows, they they make billions of dollars
Mm.
for pushing drugs and killing people all over the world. So I'll admit I've got a problem with those kind of people, and I struggle. I really struggle bad around this whole question of forgiving those kind of people.
Mm.
And these are people, going back to the point, people that I've never met personally, but once you know, and so in that way, I'm kind of like one of my spiritual uncles who has spent 60 years saying names, calling names on these people. Now I'm not going to call a name because I understand on different platforms they be trying to ban you and all that kind of stuff when you say names. But
Mm.
most people can figure out who this gangster, whose grandfatherly gangster is. Yeah. So anyway, with all of that being said, I think I've kind of um, laid a palette for me to ask you this question, man. Um, Hopefully, I built up enough for you to,
Mm.
because the audience who heard what I was saying about freestyling, of
Mm.
course, I said all of that to give you an opportunity to wrap your brain around some stuff before. Um, Man, let's talk about the legacy of Diddy, man. We've kind of we've been talking hip hop the past few episodes,
Mm.
and it would be um, I don't know. I can't think of a better word than callous. for us to not take a look at that
Right.
situation. I wanted to couch it in a context
Hmm.
because I didn't want to do what I hear so many other people doing. Like I heard this artist, I saw a clip that I actually shared where an artist, um, a vocalist that obviously that he used to deal with, he was at a show and he really went in on Diddy and name calling and everything. And I sort of got a problem with that because if if all of this hadn't broke for the whole world to see, would you have said those things about him? Because
Hmm.
here's the thing, you were in a position to know those things about him before it became public to all of us. So you now trying to save face by saying those things about him now, I'm not sure how genuine that is. Now, at least what we could say about Ye is that Ye, he let you have it whenever. He
Right.
don't wait till somebody else drop the boom on you. If he feel that you need to have it, he gonna let you have it.
Right.
He was one of the first ones to, speak out about the big girl who he felt was leading other young people astray. Um, so I just think that some of the people who are dragging Diddy, some of them are disingenuous.
Hmm.
Some of them were just in his face. Some of them would be on his yacht right now if it wasn't for the fact that he's being publicly dragged right now.
Right.
But I'll stop and let you. I feel like I talked for 20 minutes straight, but I wanted to. I've been dancing around this whole Diddy thing for since the beginning of doing this.
Hmm.
And I think that, well, the spirit said, okay, today's the day. So here we are.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's now a good time to talk about it. So for me, with the Diddy thing, the recent events never necessarily came as a surprise to me. I mean, I think before we had spoken, before we actually started doing this show, we had spoke about Diddy. Prior to all this information coming out as well, I was just, I was telling you about his last album, the Love album. So actually, I'm gonna bring that up. Wow. Let's see.
And to your credit, while you're looking that up,
Hmm.
as all this stuff was coming out, now of course, I have to admit that there's certain things that I knew because we can tap in on another level. So I knew some of these things beforehand, but some of the recent things I wasn't as aware of. In fact, I didn't even know until you told me that he had dropped a new album. But
Hmm.
you had you had expressed some misgivings about what you felt was the energy that you felt coming off of the project, and this is before all of this stuff dropped. So
Hmm.
I have to, for our audience, yeah, without talking about all that other stuff, your concern was the energy that you felt coming off of this project. And so, yeah, if you want to speak to that or continue with what you were saying, yeah.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, this was Diddy's last album, and when I first saw it, the imagery just kind of yelled devil to me. So, and then when you're listening to the music, it's very where Diddy tries to take people musically is, it's not the direction that you necessarily want to go. So I think ultimately, but this is the music that has always been popular. So this is kind of a culmination of many years of his works and efforts. Like, I think, and when he started coming out branding himself as Brother Love, that was also another red flag for me. And the thing is, I've never been in any places with Diddy. I've never met him personally. Just from stories that I've heard over the years of being a fan of hip hop, I've kind of came to understand his aura or his the energy that he kind of puts out. So as somebody who's not in the industry and kind of having all of these thoughts about him, it to me it's hard to believe other people who are a little bit closer didn't tend to to know what was going on already. And the reason I think it's because growing up you start to see different patterns. If you're going out into the city, if you're going out into the club, just growing up, going to school, you meet different people, you meet different you learn how different people move, how somebody's popular, for what reasons are they popular, um what's their ultimate goal, like what do they find, what do they hold value in. To me, Diddy has always kind of been someone who kind of derives his value from his popularity. um and I listen to a lot of the way things being named, like names are very important to me. So he has the station, I believe, I don't want to misquote saying that he had founded it, but Revolt TV was something that um, was a company he was the chairman of. I think he recently stepped down from it. um, but certain things like that, the words that he chooses to use, the artist that he chooses to highlight, and I think that really does get into the whole mute when you're listening to music and understanding what frequency you're listening to something on. So I know another topic that we had discussed was kind of his connection to the origins of hip hop when it comes to when in relationship to Biggie and Pac. And so recently, I'm not sure if you heard, they were saying that after after Biggie passed away, Rolling Stones wanted to have Biggie on the cover, but Diddy was like, "I need to be on the cover because I have an album coming out." So that's an interesting story that kind of lends more to the type of where his mind is at necessarily. So, and I think the issue with Diddy now is he's so much at the he's at the origin of what hip hop is today. I'm not sure. I think me and Chris might have touched on it in the last show, but the way I kind of look at hip hop as progressing over the years, it was kind of before Biggie and Pac, after Biggie and Pac, and then there was a couple of artists who passed recently who kind of marked another era. But I'm pretty sure if we look at not even just music in general, I think if we're looking at like the content, um, language used, the amount of violence in the music pre Biggie and Pac and after, I'm pretty sure we would see it's pretty much night and day in terms of subject matter and things of that nature. Now, when and I think that the Biggie and Pac situation marked a shift in the culture and also stepped it into a place to where it was now commercialized. And with it being commercialized under those pretenses, it's kind of steered hip hop into the direct where we're at today, to where we glorify a lot of beef, we glorify violence, we glorify, like, if you go back and analyze that East Coast West Coast beef, it had all of the elements of all destructive elements that we're kind of stuck with today, and that are kind of being held as, I want to say, like almost the foundation of what real hip hop is. even when it comes to, and I think with the commercialization of hip hop and it being so extreme on like raunchiness, I guess, it's kind of propelled us to where we are at now with like the sexy reds and like I when you look at the it on a frequency level and like an energy level, this is a red, it's always representing red, which is like root chakra. That's like associated with, you know, survival and sex and things of that nature. So, and I think that always, like when we do hear certain frequencies of music, we're kind of like, I do think there's a place for that. But when it's now oversaturating and being the main thing that the only thing that we're getting within hip hop, it gives it the wrong lens to look at things through. So now people are gravitating towards this music because a lot of people are in survival mode. When you're in survival mode, the things you're concerned with is not getting killed and reproducing. So, you know, you want a lot of sexually charged music. You want a lot of guns and violence to make sure that you're. So I think that all of that is woven into kind of where we're at right now. And I think that a lot of what Diddy represents kind of pushed us into where we're at right now. And with him being at the helm and kind of being able to operate unchecked, we've now gotten to a place to where, you know, so many people are implicated just because they've been cool with it for so long. Now, now that he's caught, people are like, oh well, we can put all of that blame on him, which I'm not saying he doesn't have any blame, but I'm saying that everyone who has been consuming this music is complicit in where it's at right now. And for us making that the main thing that's popular that we choose to highlight, so it gets tricky when we're looking at where we go from here, and the fact that we've had other things that we could have highlighted and we chose not to. And real like before I lose this point, I think in the last time I kind of compared Diddy to a drug dealer when I was talking to Chris. So the same way that I think the black community kind of glorified drug dealers in the past, and I'm speaking based off of references to like American Gangster. When you do listen to hip hop, just different drug kingpins who they've chosen to highlight, you know, it's all pushing destructive mentalities onto the people. But we praise that person for doing it because they're getting monetarily blessed for destroying the community to that sense. So it's like I was saying, if like Frank Lucas had gotten busted with social media, with how many people looked up to Frank Lucas at that time, what would be people's reaction? You know, some people say that he was feed or maybe it was other drug dealers who, you know, they had a turkey drive, you know, once a month, or you know, where they were giving back to the community, so to say, but to kind of offset the destruction that they caused. And you could say Diddy did a lot of the same things when he was trying to get people to vote. But the more sick part of it to me is it's almost both CIA funded, or not even CIA, but just like kind of having its connections in the government. You know, I think Diddy has some type of connection in the government. And so it's like you're being allowed to operate this long, pushing poison to a community, and who's kind of behind that. And you know, then when you look at drugs, and it's like, okay, this is music and drugs being similar things. It's like we're pushing that, they're selling the idea. And I think that's something Diddy is extremely responsible for, behind his liquor companies, behind Vote or Die, that's his political connections. Um, so I think just a lot of those similarities in terms of who Black people end up, and I can't even say that it's us doing it for our own. Like, I mean, he might have been the perfect person for, some entities to put in place to get people to, buy into that lifestyle, buy into that mentality. But yeah, I think that's where we as a people kind of have to be more protective and really analyze the messages that are being pushed when it comes to certain people being at the forefront of the culture.
Speaking of push, my brother, this video right here, this is the one because uh, Yahweh had this to come out in a very, uh, I would say, a very neat way. So you said a mouthful, and when you were talking about how, and since you brought him up, how the devil used Diddy to be at the forefront of shifting hip hop in a particular direction. Now, when I say that, I, I'm not foolish enough to believe that Diddy has done all bad.
Mhm.
That would be foolhardy because it was very appropriate that you gave the example of Frank Lucas giving out the turkeys and stuff. And so there's good that Diddy has done for the culture.
Mhm.
So there's always a balance that we have to look at because again, if we throw him away, then we've got to throw away Thomas Jefferson. We've got to
Mhm.
throw away so many others that have their name carved out on Stone Mountain. I wonder how much of Diddy's turn has to do with a man he got connected with that very appropriately his name rhymes with Jive.
Mhm.
Because this man, when we talk about people who are connected to a lot of deaths, iconic deaths,
Mhm.
this man whose name rhymes with Jive, oh my, and he operates mostly in the shadows. He comes out of the shadows to, lay claims as this super being in the music industry, but he's a big time string puller.
Mhm.
And some argue that he's been one of the main ones calling the shots in terms of puppeteering Diddy to and fro.
Mhm. Okay.
I wonder if when we look at Diddy and his legacy, if he's like so many others who had the greatest of intentions and were just steered wrong. Because when we go back to I think he went to Howard University, if I'm not mistaken. We think back to his days and the fact that he was this amazing entrepreneur. He would throw these parties and make money. And I understand he created his own taxi service. And so he was a go-getter.
Mhm.
And so often go-getters are a magnet for all kinds of people. Often people with nefarious intentions. I'm grateful. I don't know. I shared this recently. I feel like I shared it on this platform. I shared it somewhere.
Mhm.
Many years ago, when I was in a situation where I was getting my fair share of attention, there was this guy who uh, he became overly fascinated by the work that I was a part of and doing. So much so that, you know, as I remember the story, he had cut out every article and so forth that I was referenced in. And I remember like yesterday, I was standing outside of a particular building, and my brother, my my right hand man, and another brother, they was in earshot. And being young and naive, this guy was inviting me to come and continue our conversation further. And I was gonna go with him because the stuff that he was saying seemed, some of it seemed to like it would help us in our cause. And the brother, my brother was like, "Hey, now you can't go with that guy," you know. And so, how much of what we see in Diddy's case, I wonder how much of it was him not having that guy to say, "Hey, you shouldn't go with him."
Mm.
And how much of what we see that's happening with people, how much of it is happening because, it's funny that I'm going down this path because one of my teachers was saying, I was listening to something one of my teachers was saying this morning, and he was saying that you and I can really thank where we are, wherever that is, we can thank those people who we have given our trust to
Mm.
for where we happen to be right now. And we know that for some of these people, I mentioned R earlier. Clearly, if all the things they said about R is true, he had people around him, which I understand. In the documentary that came out, his own brother said, "Hey, man, when he beat that first case, I understand his own brother said, hey, you were able to beat this. You need to chill with all of that."
Mm.
But at that point, R was so deep into his stuff that he figured that, you know, he became delusional. I understand that he told his brother that, hey, there isn't anything that paper can't fix.
Mm.
And so it's funny that when you put that image up of Diddy and all that red, see, so often what's meant for good ends up being co-opted because that red in my world, it represents the blood that cleanses. But then in another world, they've co-opted that red and made it the color for the devil. So
Yep.
when I wear red and I wear it on purpose, I'm wearing it because you almost always going to see, and I'm going to out myself. So whenever we do this, you're going to see some red. Now, very little red this time, but when I wear it, it's because I know that there was some blood that's responsible for me being clean.
Mm.
But the other side have co opted that color and made it about something else.
Real quick, I'm gonna show because when I saw the Diddy cover, I don't know either. Probably old for there was a cartoon called the Powerpuff Girls, and
All
on
right, I
there,
remember the Powerpuff Girls. Yeah.
yeah, so on there they had him. He kind of represented the devil. You remember him? This is the image that came to my head because he was always a very creepy character. He popped in and out, and he's dressed like a woman wearing high heels, and but got a man's voice. So
And That's pretty deep if you think about what they're pushing right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Go ahead.
So, and then with him changing his name to Love, it was like a lot of that
Mm, wow.
was starting to
Wow.
click for me. So
Wow. Because
those were some of the connections that I was making. Um, so real quick to speak on some of the things, like I think earlier we were talking about just agreeing, like, is there a balance? So for me, I don't 100% agree with anybody. I don't care. Even with you, there's certain things that we disagree with,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm like, and that comes with, that means it goes two ways. There's certain people who don't agree with certain things that I do. So there's never anyone who I feel is, or that's why I don't feel I have the authority or power to judge anybody necessarily, especially not to condemn them to, and like, that is left for, that is why there's a justice system, even though some people may not have faith in it. Um, but that's not, that's too much power for one man to have, especially to, so when it does come to forgiveness, I feel that I do have it. Like, i don't I don't think I personally hold grudges. Like, I think I'm pretty forgiving when it comes to things, but it's because I understand that I'm not perfect. I've been forgiven. I know, I've been forgiven for a lot of things. Like, I think my parents being forgiving people over the years when I was making mistakes growing up, allowed me to extend that grace to other people. A lot of people don't know how to forgive because they were never forgiven themselves,
Wow.
um, which also leads to
Whew.
a lot of people being predators because they were victims first.
Mm.
So
You go, boy.
even in the sense of R. Kelly, if you watch his documentary, learning some of the things that he went through as a child or a young adult, I forgot exactly the ages, but you know, everybody won't, once somebody does something that we feel is egregious, then they no longer can have the grace of ever being a victim. So you overlook everything that that person has gone through, um, and but that's another problem when you eliminate somebody from history now, because I've always, even years when he was first convicted, I'm like, if you completely erase R. Kelly from history, then you no longer have that as a teaching point. Like, you do have to kind of show his fall from grace in order for people to fully grasp, because regardless, hip hop is not even just hip hop. Music is the art, is the literature that people are leaving behind. Like, these are all, it's all reference points that people will have to come back to in the in the future. They're going to have to come back to this point, understand what we were listening to, why we were listening to it. And so many people don't want to admit that they did gravitate to that music for a second. And so it's like, because that's either something that is you're agreeing with it to to some extent, you know what I mean? So and we hear, like, we hear a lot of the negative things that are in this music and try to ignore it until something is officially until they're officially charged with something. So it's like, we've been hearing, even if you're like, and that's kind of why when you were saying it's disingenuous for people to condemn um Diddy now, it's like, yeah, if you were listening to the music, you've heard, and it's not that he's outright saying that he's doing XYZ, but being an intelligent person listening to certain lyrics, or hearing certain songs, and you're able to draw conclusions, it's like, okay, that what he's talking about in this song isn't um in line with spirit, or there's just, and that's most music. And I think where in hip hop, we want to hear the mistakes that people make a lot of times, and we do want to um, most people want to hear the mistakes so they can avoid them. Some people want to hear the mistakes so they can try and improve on them to get away with it the next time. So you never really know, and it all comes down to who you are as a person when you're listening to this music, whether you're going to be influenced or use it as a tool to help guide you in the proper direction. Um, so I think when it when we're I think it goes back to I was talking about Young Thug, or kind of how we view murder within hip hop, or just especially in the younger generation, killing ops, or things of that nature. So, and you kind of frame it as like, yes, I'm trying to survive by killing something that was out to kill me, but on the other side of it, then it's you're killing somebody who was loved by other people. And I think that's always been a disconnect when listening to hip hop, and it kind of stigmatizes things to where you're you're always putting yourself on the right side of things, and not ever taking the time to think about what the consequences of some of that is. So when it comes to how women are spoken about in hip hop and R&B, um, and then today when you hear women's perspective, like when you have more female rappers talking about their views on a trick, or just some of the men out here, and how they would just want to use them instead of cultivating like a real relationship. So it's all it's all stacking on top of each other, and it's just compounding bad decisions on top of each other. um, and we that's where we have to kind of I don't think we as a culture taken a hard look at hip hop in a while. I do think it's that time that we do and start really discussing what's the foundation that we're going to be able to move forward with, because as we can see, it's crumbling right now. Everything that we've known about, like, I think I don't know if we talked about it here, but just like I think we talked about it on one of the calls that we didn't record. But I was saying I feel like, yeah, hip hop is dying because we never wrote down any of our rules, regulations. So it's always just been kind of a whim. And when we've been trying to build on such, I don't know what the word I'm thinking of, uh, I would just say a shaky foundation in terms of like of a street code. I'm always against the idea of a street code. Um, but I think real quick, there was it was like a TikTok, and then the guy was like, all black slang is just the opposite of white slang. And I think that in America we've become just so anti, black people have become just so anti-establishment that you know law and order is against what would be black in general. So we don't like to oh, you see, and I just see it out when I'm out, like black people will and I'm not just trying to say, I'm just saying in general terms, I'm not trying to stereotype, but when you look at what's popular amongst the culture, what you would typically be called out for being a black person is something that would be expected if you were like a white person. I guess I'm trying to say. So I think we really have to just kind of come back. And I mean, I think that even with how far I think people have shifted from the church, I feel like that's been, I feel like once that was kind of, and I'm speaking just for kind of my generation right now, that doesn't really exist in, I would say 60% of people my age, black people my age, have kind of shifted away from the church, and for whatever reasons, their feelings. But I think that's always an indication of, where things are going wrong. And I think that's another symptom of older generations not necessarily listening to the younger generation, and kind of the plights that we're going through and they're going through. And um and it's, it could be the way that our message is being delivered. So there is a lot of vulgarity in the music today, but it's like, I do feel like if more older people were listening to the music, getting past the vulgarity, they would know the places that people are struggling, that the youth is struggling at, and could offer a little bit more guidance. But I think since it's just kind of shut off to where it's like, no, we can't, like, you get thrown off because they throw a couple of F bombs here. It's like, understand the sentiment of where that F bomb is coming from. It's frustration. It's coming from, helplessness. A lot of people feel helpless. Um, and it's from being lost. So, and I feel like we did touch on this. A lot of hip hop just comes from people being lost. Like, that's their only attempt to kind of get out. Like, if people are standing on the corner at a gas station or in front of a gas station, they're there because they don't know where else to go, and they're looking for directions. Like, that's the only place outside of their home that they can kind of go and see people from outside of their neighborhood possibly going. And they don't even know what they're looking for. They're just hoping that being in that area will bless them with the proper opportunity to change their situation.
I never thought of how powerful that is until you just said that. People hanging out at the gas station, watching people who got someplace to go, because these people are there to get fuel. These people are on the move.
Hmm.
So I stand in front of, on the side of a gas station, watching people who are on the go,
Hmm.
and perhaps fantasize of the day that I may be on the go. It's a very, very, very interesting proposition. And I'm still wrapping my brain around the statement that you made earlier about what people who are in survival mode do. I want you to repeat that, because that's powerful. It really hits the nail on the head of why the certain themes have been a driving force in hip hop over the past 20 years, at least 25, 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So, because when people are looking for music to match their frequency. And so if you're constantly in a and I remember, this goes back to my thoughts back when I first started We the Sauce. Um, well, with a collective people, other people started it with me, but just when the origins of that and my mentality when it came, like, I had always been someone who was like mood music. Like, okay, there's different time, there's a right time and a right place for certain music. Um, and so just driving around the city, I'm paying attention to different vibes. Like, if I'm pulling up to a gas station back in the day off of University, it might not be the best vibes. And it's like, yeah, if you hear somebody blasting some real heavy trap music, it adds to the ominous vibe that you get in the area that's, underfunded, I'll say. Um, and, it kind of causes a friction when you're in an area that's at a like me living in different areas of Atlanta now. I can see, like, yeah, over here it looks different. It's the same city, but this area is like much more, like, there's not as much movement going around on, but there's a lot of just like it's slow motion. It's darker. It's just like a heavy. It feels heavier in certain areas than it does. And the music that you might associate with a certain area is kind of representative of that. And then, but that's also why when you're listening to where the music is coming from, you hear a lot of dark music possibly coming from like somebody from the projects or somebody who's glorifying, not even glorifying, but just talking about their lifestyle coming out of what they call the trenches or the projects, things like that. And that music might be very dark and heavily violent because that's what they're surrounded by. And so that's my whole thesis when it comes to, in order for you to understand the youth, you have to listen to the music in order to understand the problems that they're dealing with. So when you do hear um, Young Thug's music, I mentioned him earlier, who's currently on trial for I don't, it's not necessarily murder, maybe like his part in the murder, but it's just like when you would listen to his music earlier, it's dark, and he's honestly kind of mentioning some of these things in his music, but he's mentioning it in a pattern that you know I don't know, it's like a pattern and a sequence that unless you live that or are familiar with that lifestyle, you wouldn't necessarily fully understand why it motivates some people. Because he's saying things that he's like, no, was, I really was getting my getting my food from this corner store right here. And if you know about this corner store, then you know what I had to go through to get there and just all the obstacles why I'm eating like so there, and that's why the music is so rich in information outside of just what they're taught. Like, it's unfortunate that, you know, I think it's almost like a rite of passage that people have to be about what they rap about. But when you're talking, when it comes to authenticity, then that's the driving force, and the people who are living in that situation, they need to hear the authenticity in order for them to believe that they're also capable of making it out of a situation that doesn't have any hope for them. And then you have to look at that from a male perspective and a female perspective. So then when you have women rapping about using their bodies to get out of a situation or to get paid, you're hearing young men talk about violence in order to get paid. It's like it's a product of their environment, and that's the aura that's coming out when you're listening to some of this music.
The way that you are unpacking a lot of this is very nuanced and sophisticated. You help me to understand in a different way. I grew up in the projects, and you help me to understand why music by people like John P. Key, Commission, Fred Hammond, and that edgy music that was coming out of the gospel experience,
Mm,
how it helped me to circumvent some very challenging terrain.
mm,
One of my one brother said that it's one thing to grow up in that environment and get caught up in that environment, and then it's another thing to be able to come out of that environment. And so often there's so much glorification on getting caught up in it and then getting out, but not as much attention paid to those people who are able to circumvent it altogether
mhm,
and not get into it. And how and you made me think about those players. And when you talk about the disengagement of Gen Z, and millennials in the church. Some of that has to do with the hypocrisy of the church and not understanding that people like Kirk Franklin matter. People who are real super churchy, they are quick to say, how somebody, and I keep bringing up Kirk Franklin because he's the biggest of the artists who are accused of being secular.
Hmm.
But here's the thing: when I'm at the gym working out, Kirk Franklin provides a brand of music that I can take into the gym and work out to.
Right.
Whereas there's other kinds of gospel music, the type of gospel music that's an overture directly to God. Well, shoot, that's not the right music to work out to, because
Right.
that music is going to have me in tears. I can't work out to that music. So, like you said, you you have music that fits into specific kinds of scenarios that you find yourself in, and then for the real churchy people, when you're making love to your partner, the music needs to be appropriate. You're not going to be listening to, again, this deeply spiritual music at that time.
Mhm.
It's just, it's nonsense.
Right.
So part of what people like me is responsible to do is to bring some common sense to what's coming out of the church world, so that, yeah, because at the end of the day, I think it's a shame, and it speaks to why so many people are not grounded, because they're disconnected from the grounding.
Mhm.
Part of it is that the church world has come off as super self-righteous, and so a lot of the people that want to connect, they don't see a way to connect.
They feel bad. Yeah. They feel super. They feel uninvited almost. Then
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
and that's when I was watching a movie last night. It's called The Book of Clarence.
yeah. I
I don't
heard of
know.
that movie. Yeah,
Yeah, so I finally saw it for the first time last night. Lakeith Stanfield is in it, and he's basically one of his brothers was he was a twin. One of his brothers was an apostle following Jesus, and he was kind of like the town like mischief maker. He was selling drugs and trying to just get quick schemes, and he kind of had the idea to um, pretend that he was the Messiah as well, and so kind of go around and faking miracles, and then ultimately, I won't give away the movie, but it just kind of things kind of come full circle, almost. I mean, just to, I would say, due to his commitment, I guess, which his path did show him, I think, the right way, which ultimately granted him favor. Whether he chose to, whatever he chose to do with that favor is, you can find out if you watch the movie. But it it really it was speaking to me in the sense that you know so many people don't, they see the a perfect the perfect people, or just the path that's you're supposed to follow in order to be considered righteous. But it's like, if you're uh, it's like there's a select path, or there's certain things that you can do to be considered righteous, but it's like, with free will you have to kind of it I would say it's speaking more matter to your commitment to improve yourself. um and I think ultimately with that you find the what God is to you, or who God is to you. Um, I don't want to get too deep in that because I didn't really have too much time to like dissect the movie and think about it. So I don't want to get in and start rambling. But
Well, let me ask you this: is it a movie that you would recommend to our audience to watch? Is it? Do you think it is something that has enough oomph that you would say, watch the movie and then, let's chop it up, or what? How do you go? How do you respond to that?
I would say it's a deep message. So I feel like some people may miss it first time through. Um, a lot of and I think there's kind of a flavor to certain movies that Lakeith or certain projects that Lakeith Stanfield is a part of. For those who don't know, he was one of the people in the TV show Atlanta. He was Darius in Atlanta. He was in a movie called Sorry to Bother You as well. That was directed by Boots Riley, who is a really brilliant guy as well. But yeah, a lot of his movies are. That's why I wouldn't. It depends on the type of movie watcher you are. So if you look for things for context and for understanding, because it's almost telling it like like a off brand Bible in a way, because it's telling a story in parallel to the Bible. So you see Jesus performing some of his miracles, and you're seeing the reaction, but it kind of gives you a different perspective on how, like, the times that in which the Bible were written. So or a lot of people may think that everyone around the time of Jesus was perfect, or they were, since he was around, that everybody around was just doing the right thing. And it's like, no, there's always going to be people who are not believers, or who lack faith, and they have a story too, and sometimes they do find the right path. So that's another reason why you can't judge people who might not be taking the same path as you. So I'll leave it at that. For people who like movies, I think it was a good movie. I actually haven't. I don't know how many reviews I've heard of it. I'm in, like, that's my type of movie. So I was all the way into it, but I do know that I have a special. Like I said, when I there's a certain amount of information that I'm able to pick up from movies, because I took a film class when I went to Georgia State. So I'm picking up on a lot of little motifs that they're referencing, just how this. So that's why a lot of people, like, I'll tell people, I was like, oh yeah, that was a really good movie, and then people was like, I didn't understand it at all. So I'm like, that's where I kind of reserve certain movies for recommendations. But yeah, if you're someone who likes it's pretty it's almost like I wouldn't say a parody. It has comedic elements in it, but like by the end you're like, man, this is a a very serious topic, and seeing kind of what he goes through. I think it's like a new age vision of what people think of the story of the Christ in Nazareth. So
Okay.
it's
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first saw trailers for that movie, and was curious about it. So I'm glad that that came out, because yeah, I would be interested in checking it out, because I'm always intrigued by creativity and a unique way to tell a story. So
yeah, it's definitely unique. I would say for people who maybe you're not the most religious person, um, you would enjoy that. And I think that's a good point, because I feel like some people who may be heavily into the church may find certain things maybe like blasphemous. It wasn't anything really crazy in there, just depending on who you are.
sure.
So that's why I would be hesitant to refer it to
Recommend it.
recommend it to people. But at the same time, if you're someone who's um maybe haven't found a spiritual home, I think that's a good, and it might give you a interesting perspective to learn more about the Bible, or to then go read the Bible. Because I feel like if I hadn't read the Bible already, I'd be like, oh, I'm actually interested to see what the real thing, because I think it lays out kind of how the stories unfold and gives you kind of context how certain narratives and myths and legends kind of come about, and you just seeing so many different, and I from a movie perspective, the acting in it was phenomenal. Like there was a lot of pretty well-known actors in it, and they gave them, like, everyone kind of had their own little monologue where it was like, oh man, you're you're killing this part right now. Like, so acting wise, and when I talk about like a movie, very good. Soundtrack was good. I think it was one of them that Jay-Z was a part of. He
I
had like a
remember him
verse
being
and
a part
stuff.
of it. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a high quality, especially a high quality black movie, I would say.
Now, where can it? Is it on Netflix? Where can it be
Netflix,
found?
yes, it's on
Okay.
Netflix. It's
Okay.
called The Book of Clarence.
So listen, I've got a hop. I just wanted to kind of put a bow on all of this. I challenge those people who are watching it live, and even more so those people who are going to watch it later, which these days that's often the case, because I know a lot of the people in this arena, they pre-record anyway. So we definitely after the watch it later crew. So going back to one of the first questions that we asked, what is it that is a difficult thing for you to forgive? And then whatever that is, what is it that would need to happen in order for you to step into a place of forgiveness as far as that's concerned? Because here's the thing, that thing that we have yet to forgive, it actually has a hold on us until we can actually get into that space.
Right.
And part of what we hope to do is to move beyond just move beyond just survival. We want to thrive, not just survive. We want to thrive. And
Mm.
part of thriving means that you are free. And anytime that there's someone that is taking up so much space that you're not able to release them, then they've got you.
Mm. I think I think what makes that question difficult is about what's hard for you to forgive, is just the fact that it really depends on who the person is, because I can be lied to by a stranger and forgive them without anything, but it's like if I'm lied to by my mother, my father, it's a different type of,
Sure.
a different
Yeah.
type of hurt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
that's
get it.
why when it comes to an actual action that you're, or what you're forget, it's hard to say what that is if you're not putting in context of who it is and what that relationship is. Because for me, I they say that after the first after the first 5 minutes, you're no longer angry, or first 20 seconds. So it's something short where you're only experiencing the emotion of anger for a short period of time. After that, you're choosing to kind of be angry. Um, so I don't really associate. I can't think of anything at this point that I have that I personally haven't forgiven. Whether I have forgiven that person to their face or just forgiven them within myself, I think that that's I don't like to hold on to any ill feelings towards anybody. So um, I think the relationship after that does change, depending on, the violation, and things like that. But I don't think there's anything that I would deem as unforgivable for me. Um, yeah, and I'll just have to leave it at that. I don't think
That,
there's anything like this thing.
that's a blessed place to be in. And as I said earlier, as far as that super villain, I have to admit that I haven't gotten there yet. I'm
Mhm.
working on it. And really, that statement is also for the people who will watch this video and to challenge them to find a way into that space of forgiveness. And sometimes we can we can be aided in that process by reconnecting with those people who are expert at helping us to push into forgiveness. You know, our spiritual leaders have been trained to help us in that way. And then aside from them, you've got therapists and counselors that are useful.
Mhm.
So I also want to recommend that
For
as
sure,
well.
for sure.
Yeah. So I think this was a really good one, and you know, I think that we went at the whole Diddy question in a different way, and hopefully it will challenge us. It will challenge us to consider those people who find themselves in the spotlight and having their issue being tried by the public, if you will. And again, it's not so much about, as you said, making a decision on how the adjudication should go. For me, it's more about how do I now relate to this person and the brands that I supported. You got Sean John, and you got,
Mhm.
I've worn Sean John, and actually have liked a lot of the things that I bought that say Sean John. So do I burn up my Sean John now, or and so this
Real
is a
quick on that,
yeah.
real quick. There's a lot of things that I think if we try to go back into history, and if we were to look at every invention that was made and then kind of did a history check on the person who invented it, we probably wouldn't have a lot of the modern things that we have today. Even when we're looking at like Greek philosophers and just different things, like some of the things that like Socrates and Aristotle were accused of just in the past. So it's just like I don't feel, and that's where I think that people's contributions, art is made by imperfect people. Nobody on this earth is perfect, and I think that's something that we all have to remember. I think we even talked about it, like if if we start looking at all the song credits and then did a background check on all the people who were
Had
the
to burn up
managers, it's
everything.
like, you know what I mean. So to me, that's where, and I think that's where we really have to have that discussion, because I mean, so many people, I think a lot of people's basis for kind of discontinuing listening to R. Kelly's music is they don't want to put money in his pocket, things like that. I'm like, there's there's a bass player who, like, there's music is collaborative in a lot of ways, so it's just
That's
like,
right.
you know that's where we're gonna run into a lot of these problems, a lot of these discussions, and that goes to that. Gospel isn't void from that either. Like,
That's right.
so we have to, I think, is just human beings, remember that we are all imperfect, and before you judge, like, you have to be honest with yourself when you're listening to some of this music. Understand, are you connecting with this because you've made that mistake, you've thought about making that mistake, you're living out that mistake through that person. Like there's a lot of different intricacies in why we listen to music, how we listen to music, and how it's consumed. So we just have to be a lot more responsible. That doesn't mean not holding people accountable. And I think we need to work on our accountability and the direction that we're going. So it's like, but we need to listen to the music in order to understand what direction we need to help steer people in. Because if you're not hearing all of the crazy stuff that's being said on the music, then you don't know what direction to help guide people. Because they could just be talking to you saying, "Oh yeah, we're good," but then in the music they can't hide. That's the honest truth that they're saying right there. So I just wanted to say that real quick.
And this will be my last word, and I think it ties into what you were saying. The book that I like to read says of Yahushua when there was this lady who was caught in the very act of adultery. And, we've heard the story, but it never really hit me until a teacher was sharing this recently, that this woman was caught in the act of adultery. I mean, getting, literally
Mhm.
getting pounded. And Yahushua came to her defense and said, "You who is without sin, you cast the first stone."
Mhm.
And so, that's those are my last words on
Right,
that.
right there. They had that scene in the Book of Clarence as well.
Oh, really?
Mhm. They did touch on that.
I can imagine
So
it was interested in that. I'm
yeah,
gonna check that
mhm.
out. I'm gonna check
Yeah,
that
yeah,
movie out.
yeah.
All
So
right, man.
yeah,
Well, I appreciate you, and let's see if we can get this one out. I think this is a good one. I think this is
yeah,
a
we touched on a lot of good topics here. So real quick, let's just outro. Thank you everybody for joining us today. A lot of deep conversations, a lot of controversial topics that we're talking about. So let us know how you felt about it. Some people may be offended with some of the takes that we had. We're here for open dialogue. We're not here as the, you know, single source of truth. We're discussing it as regular human beings who are also flawed themselves. So please join the conversation. Contribute in any way that you feel. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we will talk to you in our next episode. I don't know if it's next week or 2 weeks, but we'll figure it out and we'll let you guys know. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. Have a good night.